Welcome to the Gospel and Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Nerbos, and each episode I bring in guests to discuss issues related to the world's cultures from a Christian perspective. All right, I'm here with Dr. Tom Steffen, Professor Emeritus at Biola University. What's another way you would introduce yourself these days?
A rancher,
Okay.
a dog raiser, a horse racer, raiser, I should say, not racer.
Yeah, all right. So you first had a career as a missionary. Philippines, what did you do there? What brought you there? Is that where you wish you'd stayed?
Sometimes. We went there, so we've been there, we were over a 15-year period of time in the Philippines. We were with New Tribes Mission, now Ethnos 360. And our job initially was to do church planning among the Antipolo Amduntu Ifugao, which is in central Luzon, one of the 5 groups of Ifugao. And so a couple there from actually my home church, who was with SIL, invited us to do the church planning. And so that's how we ended up there. And when we arrived, there about 1/5 of the New Testament was done. As of last year, almost this time last year, I was back to celebrate kind of like 50 years almost. The math is a little different, but 50 years celebrating the coming of Christianity into the Ifugao group. And it was great to see. There are 11 churches in the whole area, which means the whole area is churched. The entire Bible is translated. They have their own hymnals. They have a lot of commentaries. So they are also have an association of churches of all the Ifugao. So they're part of that. So there's a assistance, in a sense, from outside assistance to help all the different churches as well. So out of those 11 churches, 10 of them are pretty strong. So it was a fun time.
Success story of missions in the Pacific.
Yeah.
There was something about your experience there that set off your career not just as a missionary, but a missiologist.
Mm-hmm.
What made you turn that corner or turn missions into missiology?
Yeah. One of the two training principles we received from New Tribes Mission before we went was the 3 selves: self-governing, self-propagating, self-supporting in the whole church area so that they would be able to be on their own. Then the second one was work yourself out of a job. So the two are kind of parallel but different. So we arrived there, and after 20-some years on the field there in the Philippines, the Philippine field being in existence for some 20 years, I should say, that there I started asking questions at their guest home there. How many of works have been turned over to the local tribal people? And there was none. And so I started asking those questions, as I was doing that. The word got back to leadership, and then when we had an interview with the leadership, at our first time meeting them over there, they said, new people ask a lot of questions when they arrive, and sometimes they just have to learn to, things take longer over here than they do in other places in the world. So, but he said also, so I thought, this is not going well. But then he followed up with, new people also make us rethink some of the things we've been doing.
Okay.
And so he said, okay, your idea of turning works over, we're not doing it. And we need answers. And I want you to give us an answer to the field meeting basically in 6 months away. And I'm thinking, you're asking a green missionary, people here have been 15, 20 years, and you're going to ask, and they're going to listen to me? I don't think so. Mm. But he did. And he went with me during our breaks from our language and orientation school. He went with me. We walked the entire Ifugao group there, that tribe, trying to find where we could be placed. And we discussed this whole issue as we were doing that. And so I came back and I started asking a lot of questions again with people. And I started realizing they had no exit strategy. It was a piecemeal approach: learn language, culture, good, that's basic. And then start doing evangelism, great, okay. community development, great. And then they get saved, okay, let's gather them, great. And then let's teach them, and let's teach them, and let's teach them.
Okay.
So basically, they exchanged their apostolic robes for pastoral robes.
Uh-huh.
No exit strategy. So they never knew when they reached a place where they thought it was accomplished.
Right.
So out of that came passing the baton.
So you didn't. It's not like you invented the idea of passing the baton. This has a long tradition in missiology from Rufus Anderson, Henry Venn, and even new tribes. What I'm hearing, even new tribes in the Philippines knew this principle.
Yeah.
But the question was, how do we, from the get-go, plan on passing the baton?
Yeah.
Implement it.
There was no plan to do it.
Right.
It was acknowledged that it existed yet way back there in the 1800s,
Uh-huh.
mid-1800s we're talking about. So it's like it just never got implemented. And so something had to happen. I was privileged to be in that position, and my field chairman protected me all the way through.
So I think of kind of in a Tom Steffen career, there's an early Steffen, a middle Steffen, and a late Steffen.
And a later.
So, early Steffen is passing the baton. Is that was your first academic interests? Yeah. Is that what got you in trouble with the missions world, or was there some other controversial idea that sets a missiologist against a mission board?
Yeah, it was not considered good to write something negative about one's organization. And I didn't put the name of the organization in the book. It's not in there. But if anybody knows your background, they can put two and two together.
Mm-hmm.
But that caused some conflict. But over the years, the book was never used. But now it is. So it's like, okay, we just had to work its way through.
Yeah. Now you. I think you said it's your most successful book so far.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Has someone passed the baton? Do you know, where has this worked out great? What's an example of someone who really, or where this has worked out well?
In Ifugao. I mean, I know that one. That one worked out really, really well. And I don't know, I don't have any other case studies per se. There are case studies I know from within New Tribes Mission as well. And it's gone outside of New Tribes as well. And so it has become the kind of an approach, thinking the end in mind before one starts, many organizations now use that principle.
Yeah. Okay. So you would say mission organizations picked up on the notion, planned from the beginning to phase out, a phase out.
Mm-hmm.
What was the difference between passing the baton and the facilitator era? Is it making the same argument, or is there was a period of 20 years between those two books? Is that
at least? Yeah, that'd be 90 and 20. Yeah, at least 20 years plus in between those two books. And one of the things I started seeing, actually, when I was teaching here at Biola, that in the church planning classes, so many of the students now were not necessarily doing church planning. They were working with local people, the nationals, who were doing church planning. And so I started noticing a shift from that pioneer to more, and at that point I didn't have terms for it. And so then I started coming up with a facilitator. And I started reading when the saturation church planning movement began, actually from one of our grads here in Europe and so forth. And I was reading, he was writing that, don't do pioneer church planning. It takes too long. We can do it this saturation church planning. It's fast. And I started asking, well, why is it fast? Well, it's fast because you already got churches. So my question was, why aren't they doing it before? Why are you having to come back in and start saturation church planning and give them this training to do church planning? Did the church planners miss this in the beginning and not teach it? Did the people reject what they taught, or what was going on here? And I said, that's not what you're doing. This is oranges and apples. You're not doing pioneer church planning over there. And so that's when I came up with the term, just using facilitator church planning. You're facilitating something that should have been implemented a long time ago because of some reason that I don't know why was missed, either by the missionary or the group of locals there. So it's different. And so that started me thinking, it got into the whole thing. I went back to Winter's three eras with excuse me, with William Carey, and then Hudson Taylor going inland, and then McGavern back in the well, actually before that with the SIL guy. What's his name? The first guy.
Pike and
No,
and Townsend.
Townsend.
Yeah. Okay.
Townsend and McGavern's that era there. They started that, and so the whole focus there was on unreached people groups, and so then I'm thinking the people are not going. When you look at who's going where, they're not going so much anymore to the pioneer settings. We're talking Westerners. They're going into already existing national churches and working with them and helping them do it. So that's when I thought, that's the facilitator era. So we have changed eras. That wasn't appreciated, okay, by certain groups. It was like, no, there will never be a fourth era, okay? We don't mess with the eras.
Really? The eras were sacrosanct.
Well, they were definitely. And we had some conversations that
like
just came up like at EMS meetings and so forth.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And there was only 3 eras, okay?
Huh.
And you don't need to write on this just to get publicity and so forth. Okay. So, okay. No, there actually is. We are moved out of an era, and the reason we moved out of that era is because we've actually been really successful in getting the gospel into all these various places, and all these churches have sprung up, and now they're doing it. So actually, it's a success, not something we should be critiquing. Yeah, we can critique how good those works are that we did start, but they're there, and now they're doing the work, and so the role has changed drastically for the Western church planter to move more into a pioneer. That doesn't mean there's remnants of all 3 of those eras previously that will continue on into the 4th era. And one of that is there will be Western church planters going into pioneer settings. But what happens is the numbers now are minimal compared to what they used to be during the McGavern Townsend era.
Yeah.
It's the 3rd era. So that's when I came up with the 4th era.
A drastic shift in the way that the missions force is working.
Exactly.
And there could be a 5th or 6th era if change. How
I'm not claiming there is only 4. There will never be 5.
Maybe a digital era, for instance.
Yes, there could be. Yeah. With in 10 years from now, what do we know will be in existence in the digital world?
Your academic interests span a lot of different areas, from orality, phase out, honor shame. So how do you, that's in the mind of a missiologist, how do you study broadly? How do you tackle a lot of subjects instead of being an expert in one?
Yeah. And that is a problem. You may be kind of an inch deep in some. Yeah. So, well, the exit strategy, of course, became a problem because of an issue that was brought up there on the field. Out of that, though, just a few years later, that's when Trevor McElwain would start the whole chronological teaching model that would eventually go global under different names, but it would eventually go global. And so the whole narrative thing was something of very big interest to me. And actually, I started in using story in the IFOGAO because my propositional approach fell pretty flat.
Okay.
And so I realized I had to change, and so I'm going to try story. I tried it, and it worked, but I had no structure for it. So when McElwain comes up with the chronological teaching, he had a structure, a 7-phase structure that he used.
Okay.
Only 4 of them really are being used, but that structure gave me a way of putting into practice now how I would, and into curriculum, how we could do this. So that whole thing of understanding story and so forth got me, its origin was back in what happened in the Philippines, actually my own situation among the IFOGAO, and then McElwain, and then when I came to Biola, I decided we need a course on this. So I put together our first narrative course, and that's been being taught for I don't know how many years, a long time. And of course, the whole narrative movement, it soon, very shortly moved into the Southern Baptists. who was Jim Slack was there. He just passed away a year or so ago, and he was friends of Dale Schultz, who was New Tribes. And Dale told him what was going on, and he said we wanted to get this in IMB. So there was McElwain taught in Baguio, and in a conference down in Mindanao somewhere, and IMB picked that dude up and took off and run. They got money, they got personnel, and they got the time, and they put this thing together, and they really made it go global. And it did go global. And so I did a book on the worldview-based storying that tracks the history of that. It's almost 40 years old now, that movement. Tracks the history from when it began, how it began, and then how it diverged into all these various areas of how people did it and what they added to it. Just the creativity of missionaries is just mind-boggling, how they've handled narrative and so forth.
Okay, so phase out chronological Bible storying. These come out of your own experience trying to solve problems in the mission field. Maybe honor shame as well, something you experienced personally and therefore needed to study it.
Yeah. I ran into a few problems. I made a few mistakes and I had no idea how I was shaming people, because I wasn't. It wasn't. I understood honor shame in my understanding of it, but I didn't understand it from an Asian perspective, and it got me into trouble. So I knew that was an issue, but I didn't know what the answers were, and I was too busy in exit strategy and narrative to go into it. But when I got over here and got into my professorship here, I started realizing, man, we need to get into this thing. And as I look back now, I'd say it's around 2000, somewhere in that area, where the mission population picked it up and started realizing this is an issue that has to be addressed. And so once again, I said, well, I'm going to put a class together, and faculty said, okay, give us a syllabus, make your argument, and we'll see. So I think 2004 or 5 somewhere was the first year that was taught as a class.
Maybe as a professor of missiology, you're running into students who are working around the world, and you're having to basically come up with new classes, and that keeps you current or keeps you creative.
Definitely. I've always played on the cutting edge. Okay, once something's in play, even like exit strategy, I don't like to go back to it. Okay. I figure get it started, let people pick it up and refine it.
Okay.
And so and same thing with narrative. It's done the same thing, only that I keep playing in that. Because it keeps going in different directions, and so I want to keep up with it to find out where it's going, why it's going, that type of thing. So I do that. Honor shame, the same thing. They had in 2014. Was it 2014? 22 years ago. Wheaton College had 1 year ago or 2 years ago. Wheaton College put on their first honor shame conference. And it was big. They had to cut the who could go because of the numbers. And that thing has exploded.
Okay.
And what they did in contrast to on the International Rally Network side, they brought in people in every discipline immediately on that first conference. Okay. So community development, teacher, business. Okay. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Honor shame's all in that. And that helped get it broad immediately. It wasn't just like the church planting users using the storytelling. So it narrowed the focus, but it shouldn't have been back then either, because morality is in everything.
Educationists are interested in that, and development workers, and that's interesting. Yeah. And now business as mission is one other. You didn't actually do business as mission, maybe, but you played one on TV. No,
I did. Yeah. This was an interesting one, because I started a new class in church planting, because I was hired to do church planting here to create a kind of a concentration in church planting. So we already had one class, so I said, what's the next one? The next one will be models and strategies. So part of those models and strategies has to be what are ways we are using to help start new churches. And so back then the term was tent making. And so I used that one, and that would get changed. Actually, when we were influential in trying to change the term, um, I I brought in, and I'm blanking on her name, from Ruth Siemens up at the U.S. Center for World Missions, and so she was big in tent making. She actually started the first tent making organization, and she had where you could go and look. I need a job in such and such country.
Oh, really?
Here's what. Yeah, she started that way. This is way back. Okay, and so how much it pays, what are the qualifications, how long is the stay, all that stuff was available. And then she got very sick and she passed away. And so I'm thinking, who do I replace her with? And so by that time, the School of Business was started over here. And I heard that Steve Rundle was interested in missions and how business would impact missions.
Yeah.
So we talked together, and I said, hey, would you come over, and when I get on this topic, come over and give me an hour. Give the class an hour, at least, on this.
Mm-hmm.
And he was willing to do it. So, yeah, he came over, and so, I don't know, third year, fourth year, whatever, I said, I just made a quip statement, somehow you fire stuff out. After I introduced him, I said, we ought to write a book on this. and just, that was it. And then the next, starting the next semester, he gives me a call and says, come over, I'm going to show you something. So I go over there, and he hands me this yellow pad, and I'm reading through it. Here's an outline for a book. And I'm reading it. Wow, this is good. I said, I don't know if he said or Wes. I said, anyway, we got to submit this. So we went to InterVarsity Press. They bought it, and they said, now we want it done. And I forget, the time period was really short because they wanted it out for Urbana that next time. And we about died, but it did make it, and it showed up for Urbana in that year.
You had to travel the world to visit these business as mission in context? Or?
We did stateside ones, and we went to China. We traveled all over China.
Okay.
And when we did that, Steve Rundle decides to get a kidney stone.
Okay.
So he leaves me in China, going to these places and people that I don't know, hoping they will be there when I can show up. And anyway, we got the data, and we were also supposed to go to India. We had it all booked and everything. Fortunately, we hadn't bought our tickets, and that's when Pakistan and India went at each other, and there was like, who's going to push the button first? And so we actually never got to India for our case studies, so we didn't get any of those incorporated. But that's how it all came together.
So now, if we look at the development, orality, facilitator era, business mission, are these fads? And is that good or bad? Is there something? What do you make of the fact that maybe there is a short life or a peak, an interest in these topics and they wane? Does that matter?
To me, it wouldn't matter, but definitely, when you look at exit strategy, it's changed because of from pioneer to facilitator, right? So in a sense, that will go away when as more and less and less people go towards pioneer church planting from the West. That will be less and less an issue.
Right.
Orality, that'll never stop, because people are moving more and more to the oral plus digital now. But we've kind of gone full circle from oral to the literate book focus to the digital, and now we're back to the oral plus digital. So, and the books are phasing out. Who reads books anymore? And who's stupid enough to keep writing books? I don't know. Why am I doing this? So that makes the switch. Business's mission, it's not been that long. So it'll still be there to be seen. The whole financing of the mission enterprise is an outdated model. It's an outdated model.
Raising support,
that type of thing. And that's been passed on to Latin America all over, right? And they have problems with it. And so a new model has to come into existence. Business's missions will be part of that model, but it won't be the only one, but it'll be one of them. So there's been a learning curve in missions, in business's mission, I should say. Too many people got in who had no clue about business in the beginning. And of course, that doing business is one thing. Doing business overseas is a whole different ballgame. So things have tightened up. Organizations have people now who consult on this. So that's tightened up that whole area. So it'll continue. How it continues, and that'll move, I think, into the different, even Latin America, sending not just the people that are going to do the church planting, but maybe sending family members with them, because one of the major reasons for attrition for Latin America is loneliness away from the family.
All right. So a team-based approach.
Team-based approach. Members, and if their members do business, they set up businesses there. Helps fund them as well.
Yeah.
But it also, because funding is an issue, that's another reason that they come back prematurely. So those type of things could be implemented for sure in Latin America, maybe Chinese, who knows.
So if you look back, what difference has being a missiologist made in the kingdom of God, as far as you have a sense on how it makes a difference in missionary work? Or
Another great question. I think one of the things that missiology does, if we look at it by mission history and look at it by the social sciences, anthro, education, and the rest of it, and then look at theology, that blending of those three drive the mission strategy. And so often people start with the mission strategy, and therefore they repeat the same mistakes everybody's made back in the post because they don't know the mission history.
Okay.
So if they can blend those first three together, then the mission strategy has a much greater possibility of being successful in doing that. So, but most agencies and most people in those agencies start with the strategy without looking back and letting the anthro, the disciplines, impact that. Mission history impact that, and theology impact that.
They want to shortcut the process.
Shortcut it.
Yeah.
Fast is the name of the game.
Right.
I think where it's moving, and it's close to morality, is oral hermeneutics. Because and it doesn't matter now where you are, because of social media, people are moving more into the oral domains that are out there, and they're multiple. And so actually we're working on a book right now called The Return of Oral Hermeneutics. It's as good now as it was for the first century Hebrews. And so I'm working with Bill Bjorker on the book. So he's a Hebrew scholar, and so we're putting the two together.
There's only a handful of missiologists who are as productive as you are, with something like 250 publications between the reviews and articles and books. How do you do that? Or
whoa, man, yeah. When I came here and applied for the job here, right? There was very few publications. The Lingenfelters were writing. Hardly anybody else was writing. So my ploy was, I'll just tell them, if you hire me, I will put you on the map for publications.
So you had to make good on your promise.
I had to make good on my promise. And with my sterling record that was there, I had one publication in EMQ.
Okay. Was that the one where you said, don't show the Jesus film?
Yeah, which was very short and brief, and it's definitely not scholarly, okay? Yeah. And so I said, I'll do that. But so I did, that's why I put a lot of time into that. And then when we had a new dean, Penoyer, when Dean Penoyer came here, he said, I'm going to protect you from meetings, which gave me extra time.
Okay.
So unlike other faculty who had to attend all those different meetings, I was relieved from them, and so that I was able to focus on. But it helped the school, which helps the university. So it was a roundabout way of getting it done.
What I'm hearing is you were highly motivated for two reasons. One was you ran into missionary problems you were curious about and wanted to solve.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we started.
Yeah.
But also you needed to do something for the university, and then you had the institutional support to pull it off.
Got it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow I don't feel like somehow just being motivated and having the time to do it is going to result in 250
No,
publications
it won't
for
be
everyone.
But it does take a little discipline on the side.
All right, thank you, Dr. Steffen.
Oh,
Good,
thank you.
Discussion.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on the Gospel and Culture podcast. And to learn more, go to gospelandculturepodcast.com.